I say that we say to the Chinese that we are 2 billion strong. How many?
2 billion.
How strong are we?
2 billion.
How strong are we?
2 billion strong.
And we are over 50 million inside of the United Snakes of America.
That's right.
How many?
50 million.
How many are we?
50 million.
Sir.
Tell us.
Today.
Black power.
Today.
So I got paid. Yeah, I got paid by a subscriber in order to talk about this news. Because normally I would talk about something else. I wasn't even planning to make a second video on this channel today, believe it or not. Yeah, it's not something that I usually cover, to be honest. There's not that much to discuss about it anyway. And it's like, okay, some people are protesting. So they're right, go protest. But I guess like people are pointing out to the lack of response and the lack of coverage for these protests. Because many people that are writing in left-leaning publications, they cannot function unless they know the gender and the melanin of the people involved. So if you were to say Americans are protesting Chinese restaurants, they'll be like, racism, and start clickety-clacking on the keyboard, you know, article, tweet, share, retweet, tweet. But if you tell them blacks are protesting, ooh, hold on a bit. No, the problem is complicated. The situation is muy complicado. We cannot just cover it because it's a complex issue. There's many sides involved, and it's not so simple. It's not that simple. No, like seriously, I have seen this. By talking with left-leaning activists, obviously not the ideologues, because I'm pretty sure if I were to have a conversation with an actual academic on black studies or social studies or whatever studies you have, you know, they would explain to me why it's okay when the Black Panthers are protesting Chinese restaurants in the United States, but it's not okay when whites are protesting Chinese restaurants in the United States. I'm pretty sure they would have like an argument that with enough mental gymnastics to win the gold medal, like Nadia Comaneci, would probably be passable. But for the left-leaning activists, like the grunt, you know, the people that just retweets on Twitter and gives hearts and shares, for him it's problematic if I talk about this thing. It's like, out of all the events you could talk about, why would you talk about this? What, are you some sort of racist? Like, I love the thing. Like, no, this mentality is something that I find the most uchikushy thing ever. Events are happening through the world, okay? And if you talk about one of them, that's a problem. It's not the fact that an event is happening that's the problem. No, that's okay. Like, that's fine. Let the event happen. Just don't talk about it. It's like, and this is how they fight bigotry and racismus. It's very interesting. Like, no, this way of thinking is just astonishing. I've never, even the Christians, you know, that were the piety warriors, like, they wouldn't be upset if you were talking about something as long as it actually has happened. Like, if it was something that legitimately happened in the world and you just talk about it, it's fine. They would complain if you had the wrong opinion. But no, like, if you just bring it up to the public. But no, now we live in the day where, you know, bringing up something to the public is a scary thing. It's like, why are you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about something else? So for the first time ever on this channel, or no, actually for the second time ever, I'm going to say something nice about communism. Mark it down. The first thing was that they make good music, and I definitely think they do. But today I'm going to point out that the essence of communism, the thing that without this you can't have the ideology, is the observation that in a society you have two groups of people, the working class and the bourgeoisie, which have a conflict of interests with each other and have similar interests within each other. So for example, a factory owner, yeah, he wants to pay the workers as little as possible in order to increase profits and then open up another factory. The worker at his factory, well, he wants to be paid more. So, you know, like, it's hard to point out to a factory owner somewhere that is paying workers more than he can get away with, and a worker that wants to be paid less than he can receive. I'm not saying that such examples might never be found in the history of mankind, but, you know, like, it's difficult to point these things. And because of that, they also have like group interests. Like, for example, the workers are going to tend, in some conditions, to band together in order to strike or to demand more from the factory, better working conditions, better pay. They're going to vote for people that are going to promise them these things. While the factory owners, well, they're going to vote for more immigration. Like, for example, Karl Marx was talking about how the Irish worker is destabilizing the English worker interests. Believe it or not, at the time, bringing people from Ireland into England for cheap labor was viewed as a problem for the UK when Karl Marx was alive. But anyway, like that's something that my point is that, yes, you can make these two groups and talk about them because, yes, they have similar interests. Progressivism nowadays, social justice mostly, they replaced the working class and the bourgeoisie with the white people and non-white people. And they call it people of color or BAME or whatever. It usually means non-white, okay? And this is why I agree more with the communists than with the people that are into social justice. Because the communists would, and believe it or not, they are like actual Marxists. And on this, I'm on the same side with them. They would point out that if you have like the working class, and in the working class, you have like blacks and whites. They would have more things together, like economically, because they live the same living experiences at the workplace, and the wealth is the same, so they have like similar life experiences. That unites them a lot more than just simple racial lines. Like, for example, someone like Barack Obama, which is black and he's very wealthy, is going to have very little in common with a homeless black person in Detroit. Everything about their living experiences is going to come into conflict, and it's going to be difficult. But someone like Barack Obama is going to have more in common with, I don't know, someone like Joe Biden, even though they're different races. So, but like, this is like number one thing that I have to say about social justice, why it doesn't work as an ideology, and you can use this in order to attack it, to try to dismantle it. But the thing that is really the biggest problem and really the biggest concern for any social justice activist is when you point out that his idea that it's like white people versus the world, and you point out, well, the world is not united. It's not a united front. Like you get, in this case, you have black people that are protesting against Asians. You're protesting against Chinese. So it's not blacks versus white, it's black versus Chinese. And they freak out because you just destroyed their entire ideology now. This is why they come up and say blacks can't be racist. So when they actually see, like, for example, a black person doing a racial hate crime towards a white person, they will just say, well, it wasn't a racial hate crime. It was, like they just ignored the racial aspect. For example, when there was that case with the Young Turks cover that was like three black individual kidnapped a disabled white guy and tortured him and streamed it on Facebook. Well, what happened was that they said, oh, well, it's a hate crime because the guy was disabled. It's not because he was white. Even though, like, they were actually saying that that's why they attacked him, because he was white. But they try to, usually justify, it's like, oh, they're fighting against oppression, or they're lashing out against their exploitators. Like, they will find ways in order to justify. But they can't find ways to justify when this happens, when black people are protesting against the Chinese. They really can't, so they have to ignore it. And they have to attack anyone that talks about it because it's a problem, because you're destroying their entire ideology, their entire narrative. And they tried in the past to explain this in various ways. They say, oh, it's not racism, it's colorism. It just doesn't stick. It just doesn't fit because, racism has a more powerful connotation. But when you say, well, you're doing colorism, no one cares. It's bad. So, no, from my worldview, it doesn't surprise me at all that, yes, like you have a couple of black people protesting some Chinese restaurants. It's just, it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't it? From a libertarian point of view, or from a right-wing point of view, this makes sense. Even from a communist point of view, this would make sense. It's like, these people have nothing in common with each other. It's on ideological basis, blah, blah, blah. From a social justice point of view, it's horror. Like, this is the worst nightmare possible, imaginable. Like, just shut it down. Don't cover it. Don't talk about it. Don't look at it. and you can do this with a lot of things, like the other left-leaning constructs, like the LGBT construct. Like, there are cases where the gays and the lesbians have a difference of opinion, and it's not so united. You know, like, just pointing it out. I think there were like a couple of gay people that wanted to separate themselves from the transgenders. They didn't hate the transgenders or anything, but they said, well, transgenderism isn't a sexual orientation, which is what transgenders themselves are claiming. And we just want to do activism for people with a sexual orientation. Oh, they got called bigots, they got called transphobes and whatnot. But yeah, like, this is why the ideology doesn't make sense, because the people that they're claiming are in unison and they're working together aren't really working together. Like, for example, white Antifa. Most of the Antifas that you get to see are white. And, you know, they're not, like from a racial point of view, you'd say, well, you know, they're the white oppressors. But look, they want to join the other side. Like, what do you do with them? Anyway, right, so why are the black gentlemen, the Black Panthers, protesting against the Chinese restaurants? Well, apparently, again, this is something that a lot of progressive people do not want to understand. Africa is being colonized right now, not by the West, but by China. It's not a colonialism like it used to be, like back in the imperial era in the past. No, it's more of a modern version where the Chinese just buy land or bribe African politicians, and they start constructing factories there. They start, you know, taking certain resources from the area and taking it into China. They buy farmland and they're taking the resources to China. And in some cases, like, there might be, it's too tired for me to actually go look at the newspapers, but I saw in a country, in an African country, there was a drought. And the Chinese farms, they planted the crops and then took the crops back to China. And people were rioting there because it's like, well, there is food, but there's none in our markets because, you know, the Chinese took their stuff. So, yeah, like, besides that, you have people that are mistreating the workers. They are doing a lot of human rights violations, and they manage to do them because the politicians are bought and they look the other way. So yeah, like, the left doesn't talk about these things. You know, they don't exist. Like, anything outside the Western world is just, you know, they're like a horse that has blinders and sees just like this. But the world doesn't function like that. There were recently, actually, a couple of black individuals that burned down Chinese property in Africa, saying that the Chinese are oppressing black people within their country, so therefore they only find it normal to oppress Chinese people in their country. You know, it's happening, but it's not reported in the press. They don't focus that much on it. To be honest, you know, like, you also have the pandemic now, which kind of takes most of the journalistic outlets, but if you read the press every day, you will find like that being mentioned in a corner of a news article somewhere. So in this particular case, why are the black people protesting Chinese restaurants? Well, because China is racist. Because of racism in China. So the organization has launched a full nationwide boycott of Chinese markets over racism in the Asian nation. Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, an attorney for the organization, said that the boycott is over discrimination in the People's Republic of China, as well as the behaviors of Chinese companies in Africa. The restaurants the group chose to protest was Yum's on the 14th Street in DC, a casual Chinese food place beloved by the community that also serves subs and chicken wings. Now, here's the thing. I guess these people are trying to raise awareness of the plight. It's their right to protest, okay? If it's a non-violent protest and they just do this, it's the American way. I think the Constitution allows them to do it. I don't know how much they understand the situation China is in, though. Like, China is not a democracy. The Chinese people, they do not have a say in how their government operates. It's not like in America where you can actually do these things and actually go and protest and try to change. You know, like, you're basically pressuring the community, like, if you want us to stop protesting, vote another way. I don't know how much it works, but, you know, this is the goal. In China, however, it doesn't really matter what you want, because a lot of the Chinese people are being oppressed by the government. It's a dictatorship. It's not a democracy. So, you know, like, you can't really force the Chinese people. Like, even if you raise awareness and the Chinese people know what their government is doing in Africa, they don't really have a say in it. There's nothing they can do about it. So I guess, you know, you need to lecture President Xi. And of course, if you want to take the absolute logical sense, it's like, okay, these restaurants owners are operating in the United States, in Washington. They're not the ones that are doing pain and suffering towards the people in Africa. In fact, maybe if they were in Africa, they would do much better and wouldn't do the same things. So you're basically like punishing innocent people for the crimes of the Chinese government. But like I'm aware that the protesters know this. It's just that they don't care. So yeah, no, like this is my. To me, this doesn't shock me at all. Not even one bit. Like, yeah, the world is filled with shades of gray. It's not black and white. It's not the oppressor versus the oppressed. What is it? The systemic systems of systemicisms and. But anyway, no, this is part of a bigger movement that's also happening in Africa right now. And we'll see if the press is going to decide to cover it. As you can see, it's just a couple of people standing in front of a Chinese restaurant. But the thing is, like, if they were white people and they were doing this, you would probably see like 20, 30, 40 articles on different outlets, probably releasing within 10 or 5 minutes of each other. So I guess that's where the hypocrisy is at.